Zambia Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the show. It is May the 27th, 2023. We only have a few more days before this month comes to a close. We are back again, and we do appreciate you joining us. Tell a friend the show is live, tag them, bring them on, and let them know that the conversation from last week is continuing as we tackle and look at some very difficult things and issues of life. Joining me, my co-host and guest at the same time is Dr. Kasonde Musoma, Fort Worth, Texas. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Nathan. It's good to be here. I hope your Saturday is delightful so far.
It's okay. It's good. It's going. Life it is what it is. It's at times you have great moments. I was chatting with Brenda last night. I said graduations and then funerals and all those things. That's why this conversation is very necessary with us. We're having today, and I'm looking forward to what Dr. Chirwa has to say.
Well, but Nathan, before we have Dr. Chirwa come in, I just wanted to share something. You know, you're talking about graduations, funerals, sicknesses, and different things in our lives. There's an author who wrote something called The Paradox of Our Time in History. And I wanted to share that with the audience before we start, and if that's okay. The paradox of our time in history is that we have taller buildings. Is that good? So the paradox of our time in history is that we have taller buildings but shorter tempers, wider freeways but narrower viewpoints. We spend more, but we have less. We buy more, but enjoy less. We have bigger houses and smaller families, more conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees by Nathan, but we have less sense. We have more knowledge, but less judgment. More experts, yet more problems. More medicine, but less wellness. We drink too much, we smoke too much, and we spend too recklessly. And then, by Nathan, we laugh too little. We drive too fast, we get too angry, we stay up too late, we get up too tired, and we read too little. We watch TV too much, Netflix, and we pray too seldom. We have multiplied our possessions, but we've reduced our values. We talk too much, and we love too seldom, and we hate too often. We've learned how to make a living, but not a life. We've added years to life, not life to years. This, my friends, the author calls the paradox of our time in history. With that, let's welcome Dr. Chirwa on the program by Nathan.
Amazing.
Good morning, Dr. Chirwa. Good morning.
Good morning and good afternoon at the same time, I guess.
Okay, how's Lusaka? What is going
Yeah.
on in the great city of Lusaka?
Lusaka is great. We just celebrated Africa Freedom Day on Thursday. Lots of activity. I'm sure if you managed to watch the game, we had the Legends game, which was quite exciting.
Did you go?
And no, I didn't go. I didn't go. And today we have a big concert. So it's Lusaka is great. The weather is good.
Wow. So, Dr. Chira, it's good to have you on the show. But Nathan, do you have any remarks before we introduce our guest again today?
Yes. Last week we had Dr. Chirwa, and she raised quite a lot of what you call. She pressed on some very interesting and intriguing issues, and we thought that we should bring her back so that we could sort of revisit some of the things that she raised and our discussion. Hence, our theme today, mental health perspectives from a practitioner. She's a psychiatrist by qualification and internal medicine, I believe so. So we're looking forward to this conversation.
Mama Nathan, this is important, and you and I have been discussing the value of mental health, and this is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we have a lot of people in our community, young and old, who are going through quite a bit, loss, as you've, and all those things, and so we're so glad to have our guest, Dr. Chira, who is a seasoned medical practitioner with over 10 years experience in clinical medicine and mental health in the public and private sector. She holds a master's degree in psychiatry from the University of Zambia School of Medicine. She has vast experience in mental health that includes clinical work and primarily as a consultation liaison psychiatrist at the at the largest tertiary institute in Zambia. She also has extensive experience as a consultant to corporates and non-government organizations. So as you could see, our guest here comes with a very, 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 very colorful background. But to switch to our conversation today, would like to start with our conversation. And the first question to Dr. Chira is, who do you see when you, Dr. Chira, as a psychiatrist, need to see someone? Who do you see?
Well, I think I should also ask Nathan the same question as as somebody who provides counsel to others. So I think the burdens would probably be the same, if you like. So I guess when I think about that question, the first thing is obviously like, oh, do I go for therapy? I think that's maybe that's the first thing that comes to mind. But obviously I see different people for different things, right? So if it's work related stress, then work related stress would be in my job as a therapist or as a psychiatrist. Then I would see a therapist. I do see a therapist on occasion as well. And then I also see my colleagues. So my colleagues obviously would be people who are working in the same space. So we have what you call practitioner confidentiality, if you like. So I do get briefed, and we do get supervision as well. So in that regard, I would go to somebody who's trained, if you like. But then I also go to my friends, right? So I'm also human. I'm not immune to trials and tribulations, or to difficulties, or to stress, if you like. So I do go to my friends. So I have a few people I trust. One of my best friends, the doctor. So I'll go to my friends. So it just depends on what it is that I'm going through and what it is that I need help for. Yeah.
Isn't that, if I may throw in a question here?
Please do so, Annie.
when it comes to work, yeah, when it comes to work related, don't you, I know there's the confidentiality aspect of it. Don't you have that little reservation to say my colleagues may look down on me if I open up about this?
Um, Not really. I think part of the reason, and I think I'll dive in this a bit later. Part of the training also will tell you that nobody is exempt,
Hmm.
right? No one is exempt. There's no person who is exempt from I call it stress or from difficulty or from. I mean, you mentioned loss, for instance. So we're not exempt. So already it's already inculcated in us right from the training that anybody can have a breakdown, anybody can encounter. So again, if you're working in a professional setting, that shouldn't really be a problem because it's part of the teaching. It's part of the teaching to say you need to take care of yourself first. And well, lucky now, I think it was a
Hmm.
problem maybe some years ago, but now part of the teaching is just that. How do you preserve your own, your own functioning and your own well-being before you're able to then take care of people? So it's not really something that I struggle with. No.
Okay.
Dr. Chira, I appreciate your answer, and I think it's only fair that we go back to Nathan and actually press you a little bit as well. As a pastor, who is your pastor, and when you do need those outlets, where do you go?
Almost on the similar lines like what Chirwa said, I would break it down this way. There are those personal issues that you deal with as a pastor. They could be family related. There could be also ministry related, where you're dealing with a situation within your work where you need somebody to give you an input, okay, or insight on a certain matter that you could be dealing with. Like she said, I have friends. I have a friend that I've done ministry with for years. Uh, this gentleman we started from a long time. We served as church leaders together at some time, deacons, the way the church hierarchy goes. We served as deacons and then elders. Of course, I got ordained as a pastor and into ministry. And interestingly, Dr. Chira, this gentleman, I came here early, so he too and his family moved here. So you see, he's close to me. This is one person who is, in ministry when you work, you have a situation where people look at you and like, no, you are a pastor, you can't say anything to him. You know what I'm trying to say? But this is one gentleman who is not, if I may use the word, afraid to address anything with me. He'll just come up and say, hey, dude, no, not this, or we'll be having a conversation about something, and I'll tell him to say, hey, look, this is the way I'm looking at this, and he likes using the expression, have you finished? Can I give you my view on that? Yeah, things like that. So that's how it is. Personal matters, family matters, and it's very important, Henry, and I'm glad you came back and pressed that to say you're going to press me on that, especially those of us in the clergy or pastoral work. I need to emphasize this. You need to have somebody who speaks into your life.
Wow. Wow. Thanks, Nathan. Dr. Chira, I think this is a good place for us to segue into the next question for you. How, you've been practicing for over 10 years. How do we normalize, therapy in our culture? How do we normalize therapy in our culture?
Okay, so I'll take you back a bit to the earlier question, and I think just as a comment, I think what's going on now is that a lot of people um, are not open to help, right? So, and I'm happy that Nathan talked about it. So, it's one thing to ask for help, but then it's also another thing to be able to receive um, the help. And I mean, last time we talked a lot about how we're socialized and how we are living. So, I think that the take home starting from now should be we should be able to ask for to be able to ask for help. So, in going into the question on therapy in terms of our culture, I just find it interesting that we think that therapy is a foreign concept, right?
Mm,
And because
mm,
when you look back, what is therapy, right? Therapy is some form of treatment. It can be massage, it can be so if it's a therapist, it can be hair, it can be whatever. It's something that makes you feel better. It's something that's supposed to be healing. It's something. So how it's now been labeled out of culture, is I think that's the question, because when you really think about it, I think therapy has always been a part of our culture. And I think what we need to do now is just redefine and realign it as such. Because when you look back, even in the stories, in terms of it may have been stories around the fire when it's time for bed. It could have been there's a wise woman in the
mm,
village who people go to. It could be a designated nasenge in every family who takes people through different points. So therapy has always been it's always been a part of our culture. So now that we've shifted, I suppose, in terms of how we live, because remember the way we used to live, there are things about how we used to live that were very protective to the problems or the trials and the tribulations that we have now. Because now we live more isolate lives. We're all isolated.
mm,
So, and we live alone, or so it's more nuclear. And when you really think about it, that's where many of the problems stem from. So I think it's actually the opposite, right? Like industrialization and everything is what has brought on, like a different narrative when it comes to therapy. So I would say, I think first and foremost is to re-identify with therapy as a part of our culture, and I think that's the first step in reintegrating it into our culture. Yeah.
okay.
mm,
Well, so it's like I remember when Nathan maybe bushkuna mwikara na kuisaba famina kumushi. Somebody's visiting from the village. Hmm? And then they start telling you, "Kwad koka shkulu, we had a grandpa," and then those wisdom passed on in some of those stories, as you're saying, Dr. Chira. I think sometimes, especially maybe as Africans, we tend to be blindsided by this Western surge of ideas that we forget our own values. Just like recycling in Zambia, we've been recycling for as far as I can remember. Remember, you buy cooking oil, you use that same can for whatever. But anyway, I digress. Um, so we're now talking about formal therapy, Dr.
Mhm.
Chira. What are the steps in identifying? So if I have a challenge in my life, say for example, I have an overwhelming issue and I'm trying to identify a therapist. What steps should I take in making sure that I match myself to somebody that is ideal for my circumstances?
Okay, so I suppose now that we've sort of normalized the therapy, so it's just important to note as well. And I think even as we are discussing the idea of you know the therapy process as we are calling it now, but still, I think I would like to emphasize that it's very important that we
mhm,
still identify with the fact that you can get therapy from different places,
Okay.
right? And for different things. So, meaning it doesn't always have to be a formal therapist,
Hmm.
and so psychology on the art of it is taught in different places. So, some churches, for instance, have brilliant programs, if you like, and they have designated people who undergo training and are certified counselors. So, so you can go there. So meaning that you could go to the church, for instance. Like I said, also in society, there are people who will be identified. And then sometimes you can identify a friend, who can. But for the purposes of like a formal um, setting, and you want to talk to somebody especially somebody who's anonymous, because sometimes you want to talk to somebody who doesn't know you because you feel there has to be no bias. So first of all, I guess it's you have to identify what your problem is for yourself if you can. Just so that you're seeking a specialized therapist for starters, especially if you have that privilege. Some people may not have that privilege and they just have to go to somebody who's more general. But if you've identified to say that you have marital problems, for instance, or you have problems communicating with your child, or you have you are having flashbacks, so you have some trauma, there's specific people who are trained for different things. So a couple therapist may be different from somebody who is more trauma. So the first thing would be to, find the right person with the right qualifications, if you like, right? So the right qualifications. So if you're looking for a couple therapist, you should look into somebody who is specialized in that field. So it's very important for you to understand the background and read, the reviews. And I think now we're privileged to we can access some of this information. Look into how many hours that they've done, what trainings have they done, how long have they been practicing, if that's an issue for you. And then also costs. You have to understand what is it that I can afford, what is available to me, and um, I think those things. So the other thing is you should ask. You can find a good therapist if you get one on recommendation as well. So that's the other way. So you could ask, if you're open enough, say, who would you recommend that I see? I think most of the times, if there are people who are around you who are good and have got good intentions, they will recommend a therapist that you can see. So, and then the other thing I think is to understand. So you have to look into the therapist, right, and understand what their value system is as well, because different therapists have different value systems. So if somebody has said that they practice Christian-based therapy, or they are Buddhist, or they have, or they are liberal, you should understand what that means, and that how that will either help or conflict with the person that you are. So you also have to do a bit of background in terms of how do you think that you align with somebody, and you have to be open-minded. And it's okay to not bond or gel with your therapist. And if you do recognize it in the first time, it's okay to go to another person. But at the same time, it's okay to give it a bit of time, because it's a process, right? A therapeutic relationship is a process. So I think that's kind of what I would say. I didn't want to put up a list in, I just wanted to give it from a practical point of view, as opposed to putting out a list which anybody can get anywhere, really. Yeah.
Nathan, you're smiling. What's the smile about, Nathan? Please speak. I want to hear your words. You're smiling.
You see, the smile is that she's used the word. She didn't want to put up a list. She gave a practical response, which I think is the best approach. Because I'll tell you this, even in ministry, in pastoral work, they tell you the best sermon is one people live at a personal level. You can come out there and put out Greek and Hebrew that you have learned. But if my uncle in Kashkishi cannot relate to the Hebrew, what good is it? Dr. So good is the Hebrew. If my uncle in Mwansabombe or in Petauke cannot relate to it, to be practical. I have a question, Henry, for Doctor. Last week, I was intrigued by your lifestyle medicine practice statement. Or please elaborate on that and what it entails and the lifestyle medicine. I had a lot of feedback from people after the show to say, wow, that was something that she said there.
Okay, so I think lifestyle medicine is more like, it's like a fancy term, right? It's a fancy term to like holistic medicine, So, we have a lifestyle. So every day that whatever we do, it's a lifestyle. So it's just how does that intertwine with with medicine? So what are the things that we're doing, um, that will affect our health, on an individual level for everybody, regardless of disease and whatnot. So it's more preventative approach, So it's like lifestyle. So starting from
Okay.
birth to death. So it's more like preventative and integrative. So it's where you utilize knowledge and you utilize science and you bring in everything that works into like one pot and see how it works. I'll give you an example. If somebody who's it means somebody who's 25, let's say somebody who's 25 years old has got no disease whatsoever. They're fine. They're okay. What does this mean for them? It just means that they should already have a concept of what are the things that they need to do to preserve their health. So to preserve their physical health, to preserve their mental health, and just overall wellness. So like I said, wellness is everything. So it's social. It's, your social health. I call it that. Your occupational health, your spiritual health. So what are the things that they need to do at 25 to make sure that they can have their best life. And then the same applies. So if you have somebody who's got diabetes, for instance, what are the things that they need to do to first get well and then to maintain that? So now to maintain a state of health requires that you take medicine, requires that you exercise, requires that you pray, requires all these things. So lifestyle medicine would be just how do you integrate all these aspects of somebody's life so that they can just have the best, they can live their best life, if you like. So it doesn't just look into, we'll just give you medicine and, or we'll just, you just go for therapy. What else, how are your finances going? Are you eating well? Are you sleeping? How are your relationships with your friends and with your family, with your spouse? So it's just a very integrative approach to medicine.
Dr. Chirwa,
That's that.
Dr. Msoma, let me throw in this one
please
here.
go ahead.
Let me
Please go
throw
ahead.
this one here. And I don't intend to be unfair to Dr. Chirwa. Just comment as much as you, as lead to, or as however, what, I don't even know which word to use here. What are the dangers or the risks of hyper spiritualism in dealing with just everyday issues or life, when you are even just supposed to get rest or sleep, that you are being hyper spiritual?
Okay, first let me ask you another question. Maybe define hyper spiritual for me first.
Nathan.
Because I might not be, so just give me some idea of how I can look at hyper spiritualizing.
Seeing demons in everything. When a person is sick, the devil. When a person is behind the scenes, the show, I related a personal matter to you. Let me just bring it up here. I told you that I have experienced, suffered 2 bereavements, very close people to me, within a period of less than 30 days. A very close friend was my best man on our wedding, and my cousin, a pastor as well, very well known. she has children and a husband. She just died a few days ago on Tuesday. So I told you that I was having these challenges at times just to sit and take some rest. I can't sleep. And somebody will say, my demons or the devil. It's a very straightforward thing, Dr. Chirwa, very straightforward things. And we tend to throw the devil in there. And it's just pray. We like that. Just pray. I'll pray for you. You are not praying enough. Things like that. Sorry to put you on that spot.
Well, I mean, like everything, I believe anything in excess it can't be good for you, right? So I think we can start from there. So an excess of anything, an excess of prayer. I mean, we've seen people trying to fast for days and days and days. There's no way that can be good for you, because I think in the same places where you find the information, it would be that you need to nourish, you need to do all these things. So I think for starters, everything in excess is not good. And I guess, like you've said, it's just, let's just call a spade this. We should just call a spade a spade. And for the most part, the way I would interpret like a hyper spiritual situation would be probably a call for help. Like a call for help, because it's usually you find that it's convenient excuses. I call it convenient excuses for what may be a deeper problem. So I don't know, but in practice, I try to explain what is going on for what I feel is going on. So if somebody says it's demons, I'll sit down and I'll break it down to what I actually think maybe going on. So let me try and think of an example of so a hallucination. Let me describe like a hallucination in psychosis, for instance. So sometimes people have hallucinations for different reasons. It might be because they're anemic, or because they they might have even something medical. And this is a common one. We're seeing birds. I can only say it in Nyanja. Maybe a lot of people.
Oh, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Chinyoni chikumwa blood. Chinyoni chikumwa blood. Chinyoni chamnewa matuma chikumwa blood mutupi. Right? So at the point when someone is having hallucinations, it means they have in anemia, for instance, they have an HB of, let's say, 2 or 3. So the brain will malfunction. And when the brain malfunctions, they'll have what we call a hallucination. And the hallucination is where you perceive things that are not there. It's just disease. It's just something that's going on in your brain. So usually I'll challenge the person. I'll say, okay, let's take medication and then let's see and call it for that, and try and give examples. Around it. A lot of the times I succeed, and that's because I take time to sit down and actually explain it in that way, to say, look, this is what may be going on. You know what happens when you feel stress, and I break it down like that. Sometimes I don't, because people are fixated on whatever their beliefs are. And I'm sure you've heard of and you've seen in the papers of there's what we call sometimes shared delusions, where people become actually hyper spiritual. In this case, maybe they'll put somebody to a tree and then they'll light a fire. You've heard of ritual killings and things like that. And there's a way of explaining that, and most of the times they'll be like, no, it was something spiritual, something was told to me. A voice came and told me this. And when you have a voice, when you can hear voices that are not there, that everybody else can't hear, that's a hallucination, right? That means that you're not well. So I think spirituality, in the way it's intended, it's supposed to be healing, and it's supposed to be a place of calm. So if it becomes destructive,
Mm-hmm.
that's I think that's already a tell sign. It's spirituality is not supposed to be destructive.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the opposite. It's supposed to be healing. It's supposed to help you. It's supposed to be, because remember we're saying part of the wellness, part of the arms of wellness includes spirituality. So if spirituality is one of that, it's supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to be adding value to your overall wellness. So if it's taking away from, then already, that should be a flag. So I don't know if that's hopefully that sort of touches on. Um,
It is good.
so
Let's
I'll
take
answer a little bit
some.
from
There's a
that.
question. No, I'm not going to cause any problems for you anymore. I'm not going to take you there. You've done well. That's a good response. Okay. Uh, we have another Chirwa here watching. Mrs. Chirwa from Baltimore. She says good morning. And
Thank you.
before we get to our question, Naomi Musoma says watching with you. And
It's my cousin.
we have a question. We have a question here from Dr. Tokozile Lewanika. She says, great point, Dr. Chirwa. There is a big difference in not being physically sick versus being in a state of great well-being, that is mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. How do we normalize this approach to well-being in our families using layman terms?
Okay, so I think for me, I always go back to um, our our roots.
Mm,
My best example usually is, how did our grandmothers live, or like what would our grandmothers say um, about about well-being? How do they live? How do they do things? And if you go back to how our grandmothers lived, or how we lived, call it 50 years ago, I think that's the best description. We played outside with our friends. We had fruits in the backyard where people could, we had guava trees, we had banana trees. One chicken was enough for a family of 10. We went to church on Sunday. We wore our best clothes and went to church on Sunday. We walked everywhere. And so in describing wellness, I always go back to what the basics are for ourselves. Like, what were the basics? Where were we unhappy at that point? And I think it speaks to what Dr. Msoma read earlier on, in terms of what are we doing now versus how, are we happy with this push, if you like, for whatever it is that we're pushing for, be it wealth, be it fortune. So the way I explain wellness to people is, um, our our grandparents lived longer, they were healthier, and they had less. So what did they actually do? So that's my approach. That's how I usually explain it. I explain it just in terms of um, our own setting. Yeah.
So let's learn from the past. Let's learn from our ancestors and what they bring to the table. But Nathan, any follow up before I go to the next question? Do you have anything there?
So I was sorry. Let me just add this. So
Please, go ahead.
if you look at everything that we're doing now, and I think this is why I'm quite passionate about us looking to looking backwards, if you like, as we go forward. If you look at all the science, everything around well-being, everything is going is stemming from what we did a long time ago. So, the phase of development came in, and so, there's science around being still and mindfulness, for instance. When you look at the things that we did in the past, I say even practices like shelling of groundnuts, for instance, sitting and kneading or doing vegetables, everything is like be still and be calm. And it's no different from mindfulness and these new practices. Have a fruit, have a fruit a day. Eat more vegetables. When you look into our ancestral times, when did they eat meat? When did they eat chickens? When did they ate, so if it's nutrition, for instance, if they say eat more probiotics, we had sour milk already inculcated. So a lot of the teaching around disease, a lot of the teaching around mental health, a lot of the teaching around everything now, I think it's just being redefined. So we have the answers, and we've always had the answers. So within whatever it is that we practice. Prior to this discussion, I was attending an in-person talk that was talking more about taboo topics about around sex in terms of a health and a mental health perspective, and the same theme was coming up in terms of we've thrown away so much of the things that we know and the things that we do, and I think it's not any different when it comes to our well-being.
Wow. I hear what you're saying, and it kind of goes with a quote from T.S. Eliot by Nathan, and it says, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the very first time." I think we all are kind of going home, and I think we have our own solutions to a lot of these things, but then somehow along the way we lose our way. Dr. Chirwa, so in all our communities, whether it's in Zambia or in the diaspora, we have a lot of young people that are suffering, teenagers, struggling with identity, struggling with, the infiltration of drugs in society. Is there any initial telltale signs that parents should be looking for when taking care of our children and making sure that we are, what are the alarms that ring that you would speak to, if you will?
Okay, so I think for this one, I think first for parents or caregivers, I think it's first to be able to identify what is mental health really, what does it really mean to me as a parent? What does well-being mean to me as a parent? It's very difficult to start recognizing things in children or somebody else when we don't really understand it for ourselves. So I think first things first is to be able to recognize it in ourselves, and also to be able to do stuff ourselves that preserves our own mental well-being. I think that's key, because they need to bring you into the next thing, which would be that you have to be able to communicate. So I think other than, oh, you can see this, if children are able to, if you create an environment that is conducive where the children are able to communicate, then they'll be able to communicate sometimes how they feel, for example. So I think first recognizing it in yourself, and then being able to nurture an environment where children are able to communicate. Outside of that, it's for the children, for the most part, it won't be really symptoms or that the same as in adults. And usually for children, it's somatic. We call them somatic type symptoms. So it will be things like tummy aches, which have got no pattern and which go away if they're not, whether they're at home, or headaches. So actual physical illness can actually be a sign of something that may be mental, that may be going on. Because remember that unless they're predisposed, for the most part, they shouldn't really be falling sick often, unless they ate something. But if they're having a lot of symptoms, a lot of headaches, a lot of vague symptoms, then you'll be able to say, okay, maybe what may be going on. So what's common in children is usually anxiety and depression, and you will see, the same things. They might be low. So children tend to be irritable as a symptom, very, very, very irritable. Low mood. They can have difficulties in sleeping as well. So they can have the same symptoms that we sort of know around mental health. But I would just stress that with children, I think the biggest thing is just for you or for them to be able to communicate with you. So other than another thing with children is food. So loss of appetite is a big thing. So they have mood issues, appetite problems, sleeping problems, just like the adults. But I think a big one would be irritability and isolation. They don't want to take part in activities. So I think what's important for children as well is when children are throwing tantrums, let's call it tantrums, or they are disruptive, or they are distracted. Usually you want to dig deeper into what may be going on.
Well, Good morning, Carlos. Good morning.
Morning.
Dr. Chirwa and Nathan. Carlos is my brother. He's my great friend. I'd say my best friend in Mexico. He's a man that I met 3 years ago. We worked together at the university, and he's our surprise guest, Dr. Chirwa. I wanted to drop him in. Carlos, if you will. So he works in the space of well-being as the director of well-being for our university. We have about 60,000 plus students. And so, Carlos, just quickly, I wanted you just to speak about what you're experiencing in Mexico, if you will, with young people.
Yeah, well, I work in an institution that has 26,000 high school students, 55,000 university students, 5,000 graduate students. So all in total are above 90,000 students nationwide. So we have 34 high schools, 26 university campuses, and big challenges. I come to a Mexican Canadian. So previously I was in Canada at the University of British Columbia, UBC Vancouver. And then I joined Tech in 2017, actually almost 6 years ago in August, as a national leader of the national director for student well-being and leadership. And now I'm just focusing well-being because it's a big topic. A lot of the things that we saw in Canada and that we keep seeing now are in Mexico. We can see them in Mexico more and more. Unfortunately, suicides and suicide rates are going up, and the main campus for the institution is in a city where the rate is actually higher than the national average for suicide. And of course, the data that we have all over the world talks about increased anxiety, depression, and one of the biggest things is loneliness among young people, which is quite surprising since a lot of people think they're connected, online, but they're disconnected here and here, from the heart when it really matters and where it really matters to have a meaningful connection, relationships. So this is a really important topic all over the world.
So Carlos, we have Dr. Chira here. She's coming in from Zambia, and we've been having a conversation. And thank you so much. I just wanted to put a different face to the issue by Nathan and Dr. Chira. So, Dr. Chira, in keeping with where we are, so is it true that your work has historically affected practitioners in unhealthy manners? So, you yourself, as a practitioner, Dr. Chira, is it true that you're going crazy?
I feel like that's a trick question, but well, you know what? I think it's true, and I think it's true, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, in terms of where we get help, right? So, but I think to answer it, I think it's true. When you're working in a space where you're dealing with I'll call it a lot of heavy stuff, like a lot of heavy lifting. You will go crazy, and the data has shown it as well that you know psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, they're up there in terms of stress and all those things. I know a lot of therapists quit their jobs just to preserve their own mental well-being. So why would you quit if you're not going crazy? So I think for the most yes, you can go crazy, but that said, and that's why I said earlier to say it's part of the training, and it's part of your job to be able to to take care of you, to be able to get help as well. So you have to be very deliberate about getting help, about recognizing your own signs. We've got what we call supervision as well, where you have somebody who can debrief and help you through your own journey. So you have to be very deliberate about that. Otherwise, yes, you will go crazy. So I think same applies to even people like Nathan, people who are taking care of people. It's very important that they are very deliberate about practicing what they preach. So I guess it's yes or no, but mostly yes.
Brother Carlos, Carlos said something about compassion fatigue. Carlos, do you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, compassion fatigue is something that is real, and compassion fatigue is this feeling that we get or that people get. And we saw that a lot over the pandemic, during the crisis, the COVID crisis, because people caring for other people need to care for themselves too. I always say that we cannot give what we don't have, because otherwise we fall into this compassion fatigue, which is you get tired, for being compassionate and taking care of others. We neglect ourselves. We forget about ourselves. And also, most people, we have not learned self-compassion, and this is key. We must learn self-compassion. Yeah, it's great, we have it in our DNA, we are compassionate beings by nature, but then we need to be self-compassionate, because we are really good at alleviating someone else's pain, but we're really hard with ourselves, and we don't give ourselves this space that we need to recover, and it's really important. Like I said, we cannot give what we don't have, and if we just run out empty, then we come back and we have nothing else to give.
Mr. Nkama.
Dr. Musoma, let me throw this comment up here, and then there's an important question that has been asked, a follow-up on to do with children. Brenda says, mainly healthcare workers are bad about taking care of themselves. I find myself telling patients what I don't even do.
Hey,
she's a nurse. Now yeah, that's a very strong statement right there. I can see Carlos shaking his head. Um, to the issue, Dr. Musoman, that Dr. Chiwa raised about communication with children, Sarah is asking a question here. She says, you spoke about communication being needed to identify and aid children when struggling with mental health. Could you speak on how the communication should? I feel like a lot of parents hear communications being important, but the tone of action, wow, it continues. The tone of action while communicating makes the children pull away rather than feeling safe.
I'm so proud of Sarah by Nathan. That's my niece, by the way. That's Sarah. That's my niece.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe I can comment. So um
Hmm.
my thing all the time in terms of advice would always be in respect and empathy. Um,
Hmm.
so meaning when you're coming from a place of respect and you're empathetic and your intentions are good, usually you'll be able to figure
Hmm.
out, so in trying to convey a message, I think you should ask yourself, is this respectful? Am I coming from a place of empathy? And do I have the best of intentions? And I think if you ask those questions as a parent, um, most of the times you'll be able to tell whether, you think issues of tone and any of those things. The other thing is that I think it's important to seek knowledge and also seek help as well. So times are changing, things are moving. There's social media. Parents, I find most of the times are very
Hmm.
delusional about what they think their children know or don't know. And I think they usually think their children know very little. And I think part of it is just trying to seek knowledge so that you actually understand where our children are at and what's going on social media, for instance. Because if
Yeah.
you're coming from a place of knowledge, then I think even issues of communication um, won't be that difficult. And if you get help as well, you could ask your colleagues, you could ask I've got this situation. How do I talk to my children about it? So in Africa, what do we say? We say the child is raised by the whole the whole village, by the whole community. There's no
The
way
whole village, yeah. Hmm.
you won't have all the answers. You won't know it all. So that's
No.
that's what I can say to that.
Mhm. Okay, there's a lot to unpack as far as this subject is concerned, and I'm not gonna do this to Dr. Chiva where I say let's do a part three. We are not gonna do that. I mean, but Dr. Musoma, Carlos, Dr. Chirwa, we have to end here. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a special request to Carlos through Dr. Musoma. We try to pick up this conversation. We'll give Dr. Chirwa a break, but we'll bring
Thank
her
you.
back.
So that she doesn't go crazy.
So, so Dr. Chirwa, I've got support here, you see. Let me show. Brenda says we need part three. So I know we can go on and on and on. However, I just want to say, Dr. Chiwa, thank you for taking the time for the 2 weekends. My good friend Henry, thank you for bringing Dr. Chiwa to us. Like I said at the beginning, this is as a result of conversations that Dr. Musoma and I have behind the scenes, personal conversations. We talk about anything and everything, and we just, and then he suggested to me and he said, why don't we just bring this on a form and help other people? And he told me, Carlos, Dr. Musoma's got this thing of surprise guests, eh? So he brought Dr. Chirwa as a surprise guest. Now she's here 2 weekends. Now he has brought you as a surprise guest. Guess what? You're going to be here for 2 weekends. That's how it
works. My pleasure.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We shall be letting you know what we are going to do next weekend. And Dr. Musoma, thank you so much for doing this, for taking the time. I know you're a very busy person. I don't take it for granted. Dr. Chirwa, oh my goodness. I need to find somebody to pay you $1 million. You've done such a commendable job.
You can build us a hospital.
Appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, build us a hospital.
Yes.
All right, we'll get together with Carlos and see how we can work that out. Yeah. How we can
Thank you. I appreciate
Carlos,
it.
Like I've said, I'll be getting to you and through Dr. Musoma and see where we can take this. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Join us next weekend. Thank you again, everybody.
Zambia Blog Talk Radio.